एवरीवन, वेलकम बैक टू आवर यूट्यूब चैनल। और आज का जो हम टॉपिक डिस्कस करेंगे, हम नेचर एंड प्रोसेसेस की बात करेंगे हमारे इंडियन नेशनल मूवमेंट पे। UPSC CSE Subscription price hike reminder, and the price will increase after 24th October, and the price hike date has been extended due to multiple reasons made by a lot of individuals. So the duration for the 1 month is from 8,000 to 9,000, from 20,000 to 22,500, from 36,000 to 40,500, from 44,000 to 49,500, and from 64,000 to 72,000. So you can get your subscription by putting like the 10% discount. You just need to use the simple code by Simplet, and then you will get 10% off. So Unacademy Aspire is providing you with the all India free mock test for the civil servant aspirant under UPSC CSE 2021 and paper 1 JS, and it will be conducted on every 10th and 25th of every month. So we have exciting prizes and scholarship for top 50 rank holders, and it will be conducted on 25th October at 10 a.m. sharp. So you can enroll now for this. Unacademy full-length mains mock paper has been set up for ethics for UPSC CSE. We have free live and special classes for 20 and it will be conducted on 25th October at 9 p.m. sharp. So you can enroll now for this class. We have special batches for UPSC CSE Mains 2020. We have advanced batch course for UPSC CSE Mains 2020, which is bilingual, which that has started from 19 October. We have advanced batch course for UPSC CSE Mains for Hindi that had started from 14 October, and we had advanced batch course for UPSC CSE Mains at 2020 for English that has started from 14th October. So you can enroll now for these advanced batch course. We have UPSC CSE complete batch preparation courses that actually started from 19th and will be starting from 26th October respectively. So you can join on a 4th batch courses that we have. The first one is in bilingual, in which the medium of instruction is in Hindi English both. The second one is in Hindi completely, and the third one is in English. And the Mission 20 for 22 for a 2-year batch course we have released for the UPSC CSE. So it has already started from 19 October. So you can click more to join and know about our batch courses. This one subscription has like unlimited benefits, like you can learn from your home, you have unlimited access to all courses, we have top educators, full syllabus coverage, we have double doubt clearing session, live test series, study material will be provided to you in form of PDF format, we have proper answer writing session, and it will be done under a mentor and guidance. This is also a one-stop solution for the complete UPSC CSE preparation, because we have structured batches with top educators, batches in Hindi, English, bilingual, late night as well as 2-year batches, prelims main test series, and we have dedicated doubt clearing classes, daily current affair practice, essay and answer writing practice, performance analysis, sectional quizzes, and along with that will prepare you for the interview also. So if you subscribe now, you will get 10% extra off. You just simply need to apply the simple code and you will get 10% off on this. We have T20 daily current affair test series that is completely free, and we have for daily like 7:30 for 20 questions for 20 minutes, and it will consist for the 40 marks. So along with that will also give you test analysis. So if you really like our channel, then you can click to join on YouTube, Telegram and Facebook. So let's start our topic. As we know that the nature and processes of the individual the Indian national movement was very complex. So we can take an example of that. There was a time in the national movement when its pioneers did not seem to be inclined towards seeking complete withdrawal of the British from India. Instead, they were just confined only to the sphere of the national movement, was only to seeking the marginal concessions on the certain domains in the Indian administration. However, with the participation of Bengal, it actually acted as a catalyst. So the first decade of the 20th century saw its radicalization in the national movement, with a demand for its Swaraj that was ringing very loudly in the air. So, but the real turn around was in the nature and processes of the national movement that came with the Mahatma Gandhi taking up the leadership of the movement in the closing years of 1910s. So we can see that now this inspiration and the reach of the movement was no longer just remained restricted to the intellectual explorations and the ground level activities of political leaders, but it was in fact like he was moved out for disgusting he felt experiences of the masses and the British rule, who were instigated by the Gandhi to become the backbone of a series of massive and the non-violent movement that was launched by him. So we can see over here that there was like a numerous Gandhi-led mass movement that became very mainstay of the nationalist movement in our country. A few other exemplary and courageous movement was also in action. That was also part of a national movement, but they were just neither essentially very non-violent, nor they sought to have very integration with the mainstream nationalist movement of the times. So we can see that the complexity and nature in the processes of the nationalist movement becomes like very is obvious, because looking at the various ideological, strategical and antagostical movement, we can also see that this was going on the various parts of our country, which came with the common objective of driving Britishers out of our country. Now let's talk about the revolt of 1857. As we know, it was the open rebellion that was made by the Indian soldiers against the British in 1857, and it was considered as a very important event in the history of modern India, because he was taking as a persecutor of the national movement in order to like liberate our country from the yoke of the Indian colonialism. And this was like a very unprecedented movement, as we know that, because it may received perceived as an articulation of dissatisfaction of Indians with the nature of and the conduct of the British rule in our country for almost 100 years that was preceding the event. So indeed we can see over here the initiation of this mammoth national movement in our country was generally attributed to the heroic event, despite the colonial interpretation of the event was nothing more than this a Sepoy mutiny. So now the revolt of 1857 basically explained that it was an authority on modern India, which was much more than the mere just Sepoy discontentment, but in reality it was a product of the character and policies of the colonial rule, and it was accumulated with the grievances of a people that were against the company's administration, and they were actually showing their dislike towards the foreign rule. So, like given to the intensity and the scale of the pioneering event, it was very obvious that a lot of debate was also generated amongst the scholars on the nature and objectives of this revolt. So we can see over here that what is like perplexing about the debate was basically the overall perspective that is made by the commentators regarding the whole lot of issues in the context of the colonial rule in our country and the Indian freedom struggle. So the scholars saw like some sort of like the merit in the colonial rule, and they just they were favorably like disposed towards the British rule in the country. So it took somewhat the parochial and the insinuating view of the event. On the other hand, we have different commentators who also perceive the colonial rule in India without any merit and nothing more than just a naked brandishing of the imperialism, that is also known as the India's first war of independence. So it was in between of these two apparently categorically positioned that a lot of scholars argued for the interpretation of the revolt of 1857 as neither just a Sepoy mutiny nor a formidable war of independence of India. So the early independence interpretation that were made on the revolt of 1857 were basically based on the colonial, and it was manifested by the fragmented view of the Indian realities. And it clearly like tried to explain the revolt was a handiwork of few disgruntled and disposed Muslim rulers also. Instead, it was just attributing to any loftier objective to the mutiny. It argued that the rogue Muslim rulers they wished to restore the majestic rule of Mughals in India so that they could regain their lost prestige position in the Indian society. But however, such a motivating interpretation of the unprecedented event could also not last owing to its lack of material evidence for the same. So a more refined interpretation was advanced to present the struggle of a Sepoy mutiny. It was basically argued that the Sepoys mutiny were precisely due to the problems that was confined to the domains of the army. Hence, there could not be like any sort of like the deliberate mass participation in such a Sepoy mutiny, but there was nothing which the masses could have been like identified with themselves. So whatsoever we can see that the civil disobedience in the mutiny participation in the mutiny was also noticed, but it was sought to be reasoned out with a mischievous attempt that was to made on the part of the troublemakers to take undue advantage of their circumstances. Now let's talk about the Savarkar's perspective on the 1857. So he was among the like the first Indian commentators, and he was the first to identify the revolt of 1857 as the first war of independence was basically made by the Savarkar in Savarkar. So he gave his the unconventional analysis on the issues, context, the various circumstances which actually led to an amazing resistance that was raised by the Indian soldiers to the British rule in India. So Savarkar reached to the conclusion that the events of 1857 were basically a war of independence for many Indians. So despite he was being very innovative in the interpretation of the events of the 1857, the arguments of Savarkar just not could gain just the acceptability amongst the mainstream leftist historians in our country. So now let's talk about the non-cooperation civil disobedience and the Quit India movement. So as we know, after the Gandhi's arrival in the political sense, we can see there was a radical alternate the complexion of the anti-British struggle in our country in the three significant ways. First, that the nationalist movement was not just confined to mainly to the metropolitan cities of India, which actually get their fresh impetuous involvement of the peasants and workers. Second, that there was amazing success in South Africa, that Gandhi already had created a space for non-violence, which was very critical to the movements that was against the atrocities in the name of political liberalization of the Western. Third, by involving the peripheral sections of the society, Gandhi also articulated an ideology that drew not only anti-British sentiments but also on the socio-economic grievances of the masses. So we can clearly see over here that in a proper nutshell, Gandhi evolved a new political program that was while challenging the political colonial regime. He gave voice to the voiceless also. So the Gandhi was very different in the nationalist colleagues, which was evident that he launched a satyagraha in the remote areas of Champaran in Bihar, Kheda, Ahmedabad, and instead of the presidency town. So then there was a hub of nationalist activities. So his political strategies brought a dramatic changes in the Congress party, which expanded its sphere of influence even in the villages also. So Gandhi led this three major pan-Indian movements. That was the 1920 to 1922, the non-cooperation, which was the first gain to be significantly, that was a merger with the Khilafat agitation of the Muslim against the dismantling the Caliph in Turkey. So the civil disobedience movement was also a all India campaign in which Gandhi remained very supreme. So basically, a salt satyagraha, the civil disobedient movement, was manifested by the differently in different parts of the India. So in 1942, we can see the Quit India movement was also known as an open rebellion and was the last of the three pan-Indian campaigns that was there as a spearheaded by Gandhi. So we can see the anti-British nationalist offensive. The Quit India movement was not very reform in its nature throughout the country, but yes, the marches also drew on Gandhi, and his ideas were zealously participating in what was proclaimed in the final battle of independence. So the non-cooperation movement in 1919 and from 1990 to 1992. So basically, this movement, as we know, was a break with the past. So Gandhi was arrival in the political scene was introduced by the various dimension by the nationalist politics. So Gandhi's freedom struggle was not just confined with the Bhadralok only, but it was also incorporated by many other new social groups which were also remained from the peripheral also. So we can see there was an extension of the constituencies of the national politics, and there was adoption of the new slogans which actually radicalized the Congress to a large extent. So not the content but the so-called the mendicant politics. The Gandhi-led Congress undertook the several measures that created the new constituencies of support. So Gandhi basically rose to the prominence at that time when there was a both moderate extremist method, and it was proved to be very futile. So given to the incent attempts that was made by the people at the grassroots to be challenged the colonial state, which allowed that was vested on the interest to grow and thrive. So we can see that organizationally, we can see that the Congress was no longer just confined just to the merely elites. So soon he developed into a proper national movement, which was based on the agriculture link, extending the far into the countries, and its support that was coming from the wide section of the population. So we can see that there was an important reason that why Congress become a very mass organization, probably laying in an effective merger of the non-cooperation and Khilafat causes. So by recognizing the Muslim as a separate political group in 1916, the Lucknow Pact, the Congress adopted its own the most meaningful strategy to build its own mass movement by bringing Hindus and Muslims together. So the adoption of the non-cooperation was for the sake of the Khilafat, because the Gandhi argued that it was in itself a great practical attempt that was made by the Congress to bring together the Hindu-Muslim unity. So we can clearly see over here that whether that only the Khilafat cause, which is not just directly linked or related to the Indian freedom struggle, but it cemented the bond between the Hindus and Muslim in the wake of non-cooperation movement. So though the disintegration of the caliphs was too remote to have an impact on an ordinary Muslims. Now the non-cooperation of movement was also brought the peasants on the front foot in the nationalist struggle. So, by according to its priority given to the village reconstruction through the self-help, Gandhi articulated his plan for an economic revival. So, through the spinning wheel and the hand-woven cloth that was from charkha and khadi, the panchayats and arbitration of courts, the national schools, the campaign for the Hindu-Muslim unity against liquor and the untouchability. So we can say that although there were many programs that may have a uniformly effective as a strategies for its political mobilization, but it was unfolded under a new process by involving the neglected sections of the society in a proper struggle. So despite all this, we can see the pronounced political content was also made a equally battle against the well entrenched that was vested in the interests of the localities. So it was not therefore very surprisingly that the peasants of Kanika in Orissa challenged the local zamindar for having an extra rent. So now we can see that the movement and its development. So the Quit India movement, as we know, was a very melting point in the struggle between between the Raj and the British Raj and the Congress, which began to a proper institutionalization of the nationalist movement by forming the INC in the 1885. So by adopting there was the adoption in the 18 August of a resolution that the entire top leadership was incarcerated by unleashed from precedent country by the mass anti-British campaign. So it was plausible to argue that the role of Congress was there in mobilizing the people politically was very significant. So equally we can see there was an important, and the entire atmosphere which already had it in the box was ready to ignite owing to the war crisis and its containment of the social, economic and the political consequences. So in the general, there were the three interrelated phases in the movement that was concerned. First was the approval that was on 8th August was based on the slogan of do and die resolution. And second was the Gandhis and then the lieutenants in the Bombay and the All India movement, which was very massive and violent and was sparked off. So within the just a week from 19 to 15 August, the movement which appeared to be the civil rebellion was comparable to the magnitude of many mass revolution, was smashed by fast and reassuring that the Raj hegemony in India, and simultaneously warning the British ruling elite of the possible strength of the future that the Congress-led movement, which was also well coordinated. So we can see that the Bombay and Calcutta were basically storm centers that was principally based on the Gandhian non-violent means. And therefore we can see there were many casualties in the Delhi, Patna that actually witnessed a very violent and the Congress attack on the British police in front of the Secretariat on 11th August. So this movement, which entered its second phase in the middle of August, it actually in the face of a brutal oppression. The Quit India movement basically was an all India phenomena that evaporated rather than abruptly. So however, we can see there emerge a regional centers which actually sustain the momentum with a greater vigor, and especially in the areas of northern and western Bihar, the eastern UP, West Bengal, and there were a lot of number of areas in Maharashtra, Karnataka, Odisha, which witnessed a mass attack on the symbols of the British authority. So we can see that the local Congress leadership was prepared on the groundwork for the spontaneous mass participation that was sustained on the slogan of do or die, and to a very large extent. So the second phase also saw the formation of the provincial national movements to conduct the struggle. So this was just not only the governments that actually like short-lived the consolidated the anti-British sentiments, but it also projected to the competence of the civil nation to the organize its own affair by evolving its own parallel own administration. So now let's do the assessment of the Quit India movement. As we know, the Quit India movement was basically a confrontation that was made by the different type for the Congress that resorted to violence. If necessary, it was to counter the British attack, and it was basically mismatched battle. Though it was because the unarmed Congress volunteers fought the British equipped with those modern weapons, and this was also indicative that there was a spontaneity of the participants who rose to the revolt, that there was like despite of the adverse like consequences that was like undertaking in the anti-British onslaught. So we can see that although there was this moral of the rebels was very high, and neither the British police nor the army and the compromising predominantly Indians were expressed by the sympathy for the civil rebellion. So, except for the Bihar police who were like declined to cooperate with its authority when the movement was in zenith, the police was generally loyal to the Raj. So the army was also like a loyal, except for those who defected to the Japanese to form the INA and abroad, and this was certainly enabled the British authority to bring the All India movement under the control within a short period of time. So we can see that although we have seen that the loyalty of the Indian contingent on the ICS to the Raj, they were never in doubt because they seemed to have felt threatened by the prospect of Congress that was coming to power, which actually gave aid and since it was arrival of the Cripps movement mission. So we can see that they began to wonder that what happened to them after like winding up them of the empire. So the Lord Wavell also said that who was presiding over the fast by dismantling the imperial authority appreciated the Indian officers' apprehension. So he was reported that to have told the cabinet colleagues that the Indians belonging to ICS also could not be expected to carry out a firm policy because unless they were sure that they continue with the Raj for at least a decade afterwards. So by giving the alarming like proposition that which was in 1942, the rebellion assumed that even there was a preeminent British strike also that indicated the extent to which the British reliance was there on the India's who actually chose a very variety of reasons to give in a very informal support, advice, information, and to guarantee a backing of their own followers, and it proved to be very abortive also. So now let's conclude this presentation. So as we know, there were three movements that remained very critical in the Indian freedom struggle. That was culminating in the 1947, that was the transfer of power from British. And while the non-cooperation movement was signaled at the rise of India, of the Gandhi as a pan-Indian leader, the civil disobedience campaign was also there to him to the center stage. So the Quit India movement, he reconfirmed that the Gandhi was perhaps the most popular nationalist leader, and despite the consolidation of the various other political forces that opposed the open revolution and its leaders, we can see that although like Gandhi led this movement, it hardly remained the Gandhian on the occasion because the many participants actually use violence in order to resist against the British, and they were challenging the British authority on the various like provincial towns and at the grassroots level also. So we can see that the Mahatma Gandhi was hardly like disturbed because he felt that the British government had lost its own legitimacy to rule, and therefore the application of violence was like very, if necessary, was justified for the force of the colonial authority to quit our India.